In our study of the mysteries of the tarot, we're using the principle of the Trinity, the Holy Trinity in astrology, that Uranus represents freedom, Neptune represents creativity, Pluto represents evolution. And we come to the Death card in the tarot, which brings us into the Path of Magick. There are 7 paths within the Elven Star. Path of Magick begins with this card of freedom, death. Now, my view of death was given to me, shall we say, within the Sufi teachings. One of the greatest gifts I've ever received in my whole life is to shift my perception of what death is. It's given me such spiritual liberation, I just can't explain. I see death so totally different from most people. For example, the first thing we know as soon as we are born as a baby, if we were having a consciousness anyway, is that we're dying. After the first breath has been breathed in, it is certain that the last breath eventually will be breathed out. And so it is totally meaningful for us to examine that life is absolutely nothing more than preparation for death. Now, this only makes sense, really, if you understand that death is a gift, a gateway to paradise. It's described in Sufism. Beyond this earthy plane of physicality, there is another plane, the astral plane. Beyond that, there's another and another and another until eventually you get to God. But the next plane that we move to after death is the astral plane. And the astral plane has the upper astral and the lower astral. And basically, very, very simplistically summarized, the upper astral is heaven, the lower astral is hell. It's metaphor. And that's because the astral plane is created out of what's in consciousness during the last breath that we take in the physical body. So after your 70 years, your 70 years and 10 plus or minus a few decades, you breathe out for the last time. That is your life achievement, that last breath. And whatever's in consciousness, in your mind, in your heart, in your beingness, during that time of that last breath, that is what creates the astral experience that you will have, which is rather more significant. And we can't measure it in time because there is no time on the astral plane, but if we could, it feels like 1,000 years compared to 100 here. So the astral plane is what you want to prepare for, not this. This is just trials and tribulations, sufferings and lessons, in order that we've got a really good chance of preparing ourselves for the astral experience, which is much more important. Now, this teaching was given to me some decades ago, and I've lived my life consequently with a totally different strategy. And my strategy is preparation for what follows my death. And that changes everything. I'm not looking to do anything in this lifetime except train myself up. And this is best done by taking guidance, accepting limitations as being challenges to overcome, realizing that I only ever get what I deserve. All of these understandings that I've got help me to prepare for that very last breath. So when we see breath as the final mystery, then we start to understand we need to train for that final mystery. And in this case, not metaphorically, but by breathing. And so breathing exercises become quite a good idea. And if you don't do anything else with your day, at least you can spend a few moments just being aware of your breath. And only that and only that, if you do it every day from now till the end, that will improve your chances of having a really good time on the astral plane. So if you don't do anything else, be conscious of your breath for a little while every day. But it goes well beyond that, because the world that we live in has created this fear of death, this possessiveness of physical incarnation. And it's just making us reluctant to face up to the beauty and the wonderful gift that death is. How terrifying life would be if there were no death. Things get old. We have entropy to deal with. This is fundamental within universal cosmic law. We have entropy to deal with. So unless we actually get into yogic, enlightened consciousness and we all become Shiva, then the body dies off and becomes less and less capable of doing what we want it to do. So without death, we would suffer eternal aging and become involved in more and more decrepitude and inability to function. Oh, what a terrifying thought. Death is a tremendous gift. And if you feel that you've died a bit early, you're wrong, because we decide ourselves when to die. That's what free will means. Everything that happens to us is for us to decide. Now, maybe that you don't know that you're doing it because your unconscious self is as much a part of the decision-making process as the conscious mind is. So that we have unconsciousness means that we're not aware of the decisions that we're taking. But the point is that no one else is taking our decisions for us. And our decision whether to live or to die is ours and ours alone. This is a tremendously counterintuitive proposal and subject to controversy. I got this information from a series of books called Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. How do you know whether all this information you're given is true or not? Well, you don't. You have to decide to use it as a model. And if it checks out, then there isn't a better one to choose. So this checks out for me, and it checks out through a personal experience I had one day when I was lost in dreamy conversation with someone who was driving back from a Sufi retreat with me. And I misjudged a certain space on the road ahead. And I certainly could not have survived. But I did. I went over a humpback bridge, and there was a bus doing the same thing at the same time from the opposite direction. I woke up on the other side of the experience, having crossed the bridge, and looked at my partner, and then I said, "That wasn't possible, was it?" And she said, "No." And later I came to understand that when we die, we go through a whole process that the Tibetan Book of the Dead describes as the Bardo states and so on. And the final state that we go through, the final examination, is the decision. Do we want to stay dead, or do we want to go back and continue the life that we've just left? Reading that a few years ago, that was staggering. And it just suddenly made sense that this otherwise inexplicable event in my life, where I'd clearly killed myself by driving without due care and attention, nevertheless I didn't die. It didn't make any sense, and I kept it in my mind for a long, long time. And then I read this book and I thought, oh yeah, that's what happened to me. I died. And I was asked, do I want to go back and continue my life? And I said, yeah. So I was put back. Isn't that strange? And we can't understand this stuff normally, but it's becoming more and more in our consciousness. The film series The Matrix teaches quite a lot about this, where consciousness creates reality and free will exists. As long as we've got the will, we can do anything we like, including we can die when we want to, and we can undie if we've lost focus of attention for a little while. Now, I believe all this because it's useful to believe all of this. It makes me more optimistic. When we look at any tarot card explanation, when we look at the meaning that people, writers, give to the tarot card death, it all seems to be heavily laden with the general assumption that we don't want to die. Therefore, death is a mistake, a problem, something that you just don't want. Well, that doesn't serve me. I've changed my position on that. I do want to die. I don't necessarily want to die immediately or soon or too early, but I do want to die. Most definitely I want to die. And I'm looking forward to it because it sounds so much better after death than it feels like before death, because we go to heaven or hell. Now, that heaven or hell decision is yours, of course. Everything is yours. Free will means that. And whether you want to go to heaven or hell is a decision that you have to take. But that decision is not simply casual. You have to take it with your whole life committed to the decision. So, if you commit yourself to the decision to go to heaven, then you live in a certain way. Probably not exactly the way the Christians and the Muslims teach, but you live in a certain way. You do the right thing. And the right thing basically is optimism. If you live with optimism, then you turn everything around to your advantage. Every single moment of your life serves your purposes. Even the bad luck, the bad news, the difficulties, the things that you didn't want, even those things, they serve you. You know this somehow. You know that you are in a position to turn everything around to your advantage. That's what optimism means. And that's what takes you into the upper astral when we pass through the veil of death. And that's all death is. It's a veil. It's a curtain. And we just cast aside the curtain and we go on to the next chapter of our soul's experience. And that curtain's pretty heavy and dark, and most people think of it as terror, hiding terror behind the curtain, but you don't see that as optimistic. What's behind the curtain is great joy, if you choose that to be the case. Now, if you choose, with your own free will, to believe that beyond the curtain is the risk of hell, let alone hell itself, that's very pessimistic. And that means you're choosing hell. It's not eternal and it's not torture. It's just your own worst imaginings. And as soon as you change what you imagine, they disappear. So if you've got this imagination that after death, hell is terror and horrible, and you wake up and it is because you've imagined it that way, and if you could just remember now what I'm saying, change your mind in the moment. Just look for the light. It will be there. Just look for the light. In any dark tunnel, look for the light. It is there. That's the promise. The fundamental promise of life is that there is no 100% of anything. If everything finally finished, then there'd be 100% God, presumably. But in the meantime, when there is creation, as long as we exist, in other words, 100% doesn't exist. That's what absolute is. And absolute does not exist here, because this is not the absolute. You know, we're living in duality here. There is no absoluteness here at all. Therefore, there is always light. In every situation, there is always light. And even though you're looking at the darkness and you're seeing every Pluto transit something to be afraid of, that's your fear. That's your free will choosing fear. There is light in every situation, even in what you perceive as hell. There's light there. So if you wake up and you realize that you've got a hellish imagination, change your mind. For goodness sake. For goodness sake. Look for goodness. And it's everywhere. You just have to look for it. If you live like that, then when you die, that optimism is sewn into the fabric of your mind's way of being. Your mind is that which seeks the light. That's what optimism is. And your mind is trained that way by this very robust training experience that we're going through down here on Earth. So train your mind in every single situation to find the light. Now, for the advanced student, they would like to be able to find light even in the darkest moments. That's the advanced level of spiritual growth. Now, of course, you're not going to be able to do that unless you attract, with your own free will, the darkest experiences that you can handle. You can't become a world-class player unless you take on world-class opposition. So you cannot know for a fact in certainty that your faith will take you into the light, even when you visit the possibility of hell, unless you've trained yourself with serious challenges here in this lifetime on Earth, serious challenges to everything you hold dear and love, challenges to your health, challenges to your income, challenges to your relationships, all of these things and more. Every challenge that we deal with, all of the hard times that we have on Earth, they're nothing more than advanced level trainings for students, us, who are up to the task of taking on that level of challenge. So if your life is really hard right now, well done. You're at an advanced level. And the test here for you, your examination in other words, is for you to know for a fact that this too shall pass. And when it does, you'll be back in the sunshine again. The dawn is going to be a new day. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is what the Sufis say all the time. The darkness has ended, there is light. Nighttime has ended, there is dawn. Winter has ended, there is spring. This out-breath that would create my death has ended, and here's the in-breath. Every single moment is a new opportunity to rediscover your power to create light. And you can't do that unless it's in the presence of shadow. It's just not possible. So you learn stuff which is difficult to learn. You learn a musical instrument or a computer program, or how to get on with a difficult group of people, or how to do gardening when you're incapable like me. You learn stuff which is a real challenge for you in order to develop your capacity always to look for the light. Now, the death card in the tarot brings this level of opportunity to us. And that means that whatever you've got going on, relationship, job, comfortable home, money in the bank, all these trappings of success, well, that can be taken from you. Some of it or all of it. And I've gone through this. I've had everything taken from me. Everything. And I was lucky enough to have been given this wisdom by my Sufi teacher before this examination. So I realized I was in the middle of an examination. So there's no point crying over spilt milk or feeling self-pity. It's just counterproductive. That's looking for the shadow. That's like looking at the shadow. It just doesn't work. It makes things worse. So you look for the opportunities. Now that everything's died in my life, now that my relationship has ended, now that I feel grief, now that I'm bankrupt and I've got no money for food, now that I've got nowhere to sleep tonight, okay, I can't quite obviously see the good part of all of this, but let me just look around. Well, where is it? And sometimes you have to just wait for a quiet voice, an opportunity, something that has happened that could not have happened otherwise. Because until we're vulnerable and in harm's way, we don't know the deepest reaches of our resourcefulness. And the end of my adventurings of this type put me on the street. Now, I'd been on the road for 30 years, but I'd never been on the street. And I was on the street. And I just had to wake up and get myself together again. I'd lost track of my magician energy. I stopped bothering to try. I just trusted all the flow of life. Everything was going my way, and I stopped creating things in my certain way. So I had to find the energy to get up and start creating my life more productively in order to pull myself up off the street. Had I not been put down to the lowest level, I'd never have understood quite how resourceful I am deep down. It would not have been available to me. And that's given rise to another chapter of my life, which is by far the most exciting and profoundly meaningful. That's the death card. It's the gate to the best bit, the next best bit. And every bit is the best bit when you actually learn this. So if what you're doing isn't actually your best, then you want the death experience. You want it. And you want to want it. So if you're actually feeling any self-pity or being disappointed with your bad luck, heal that. That pessimism is not going to help you. Heal that pessimism. And you do that not by acknowledging the pessimism again and again and again and again and again. That deepens the pessimism. You don't give a lot of energy to the problem. You just notice the problem, preferably with your peripheral vision. Oh, I see. That was me moving into self-pity now. Okay. Notice, right. Now, and you give it no more thought. What you have to do is to energize positive thoughts. Write down affirmations. Write down a list of your resources. Write down a list of what you can do now that you couldn't do before. Start looking for the positive, and that will take you into the rebirth experience. You've had the death. You don't need to dwell on it. It's a momentary thing. Now get on with the rebirth. That's the optimistic approach to all of this. Now, of course, this has been known for a very long time indeed. And 1,000, 10,000 enlightened, wise people have actually created for us a way to repair the broken mind that focuses on pessimism, and repair it so that we focus on optimism and faith. Now, this process that we go through essentially is prayer. However, the broken mind of religious people have warped prayer and made it what it is not. They've made it something grey, at least, if not dark. Prayer isn't that. Prayer is a mind exercise that is rooted in the heart. So the heart is a source of light and empowerment. Both of those things. It gives you courage, that's the empowerment, and it gives you compassion, that's the light. They're both associated with the heart. So beneath our prayer must be the heart. The heart has to be involved in prayer for it to be prayer. Passion, therefore, beauty, therefore, love, therefore, that's the root, that's the foundation of prayer. But the mind's clarity is what directs our energy. So the energy that we've got is building up in the heart. It's passion, the yearning to be one with God. That's a heart experience. But the clarity that we need to know which direction that we need to walk in towards God, that comes with the mind. Now, the clarity of the mind is gained not really by repairing broken thoughts or negativity of mind. Not really. That's what I've just explained. If you try to focus on the negative thoughts that you have, you'll deepen your commitment to them. Now, see the negativity with your peripheral vision. Just notice that you're being negative. Somebody may give you a clue, a life scenario, an event can give you a clue. Oh, whatever happens to you that's not what you want, that's your fault. It's nobody else's fault. It's a fault. It's not something to be guilty about. It's just an error, a fault. It's wrong. It needs repairing. Okay, so when something's wrong, you fix it. But if there's something wrong in your house, like the plumbing's gone wrong, you don't focus on the plumbing and think, oh my God, that's a problem, what am I going to do? You pick up the phone and you discuss this with a plumber. So do that with the mind. And what's the plumber? Prayer. Anything that's wrong with the way you think is healed by prayer. And anything that's wrong with your life circumstances, anything at all, is wrong with how you feel about life. Anything other than joy as a normal resource that you can call upon any moment. Anything else suggests that your mind needs repairing. Therefore, we need prayer. Now, prayer can take the form of a vernacular sentence. In other words, in my case, the English language. And it can be useful. I pray in English daily, but it's not as powerful to do that. That works on concept, because vernacular words work on the concept aspect of mind. You think, you make a decision on the mental level. But what we need is that kind of prayer that touches the feelings and aligns with this radiance of energy coming from the heart. We need to speak to that, and then that will draw this energy into the mind's clarity. To do that, mantra is required. And when I say mantra, I don't mean saying something in the vernacular language frequently. And the word mantra has been abused as well. The word prayer has been distorted. The word mantra has been distorted. A mantra is not a vernacular thing. It's in certain languages that are onomatopoeic. It has to feel like the wisdom that it conveys. So if I say the word for the one in English, God. If I say it in Aramaic, Avum. In Arabic, Allah. In Sanskrit, Om. In English, God. In German, Gut. That's where God comes from initially, goodness. French is a bit better, Dieu. There's some sweet sound to Dieu. But the word we use for God doesn't compare to Allah, which is the name of breath, or Avum, which requires the heart to be operating when we say it. God you can say without feeling the heart. You can't say Avum without feeling the heart, or Allah without noticing the breathing rhythm. So these mantric words, these words that come from mantric languages, Arabic, Aramaic, Hebrew, and Sanskrit, those languages give you this onomatopoeic. The body is involved in how we speak the name of God. Now, this is prayer. Now, I don't really want to suggest that vernacular prayer doesn't work. It does. But mantric prayer works on a deeper level. So we fix the broken mind that is seduced by pessimism and repetition of lies. We fix that brokenness of mind by repeating the name of God as a heart experience. And we do that as many times as possible during the whole of your lifetime. The more you do that, the more preparation you're getting for that last breath, which takes you through the veil of death into the astral plane. And because you've got the mind, which is pretty unaltered by the death, the mind just carries on. And if it's positive and optimistic and is trained to look for the light, we'll just only see heaven. You won't see anything else. And you'll see whatever you expect, whatever you imagine will happen at the moment of death. That's what you'll see, and then that'll make you feel comfortable because you've got some familiarity with it. And then everything changes. I'm not going to talk about that more deeply here. We're discussing the fact that the death card and the death experience is a gift for the mystic, for the adept, for the esotericist. It's a gift. It's a precious gift. In terms of the physical body, dying takes you into a much, much better place. In this experience, you can go through little death experiences in the same way, giving up something that you've become habituated to and familiar with. It's a bind. It creates grief within us. And so we have to deal with grief. Now, grief is perhaps one of the most debilitating of feelings that we have, and it's very hard to control. So you don't try and control it. You try and get into it deeply. That's what I've done. I've experienced grief a couple of times, and the last time I knew what I was doing, and I just allowed myself to grieve and do nothing else. And I found a little log cabin in the snowy wastes halfway between Lithuania and Belarus, on the borderline, right on the border. And I was totally alone in the snow for one winter, and just saw that as beautiful. It was tremendously painful on an emotional level, but the beauty of the solitude and the quietness and the snow. I was living on a farm in the middle of nowhere, pretty much alone, and it was just so beautiful that I processed my grief, and then I was ready to live again. So those of us who are actually going through death experiences, perhaps you have a Pluto transit, and you're focusing more on what you are finding difficult to let go of than what's coming. Well, shift your mind onto opportunities. Acknowledge that which was is not. And that's true every day of your life. The past is not. It's an illusion. It's gone. It's not real. And the idea that the past can have continuity into the future, that's nonsense. Life is change. Your mind has been creating this idea of constancy and dependability and so on because of the security needs of the emotional body. But that's all it is. There's no reality to it at all. Death is the only certainty in life, isn't it? Change, in other words, death. So sometimes when we're going through the big changes in life, and that happens a dozen times in your lifetime, that's what we consider to be the little death experiences. These are the opportunities that we have, the best opportunities to train for the last breath. The only thing of importance in this lifetime, to be honest, the last breath. We need to train for that, and we can't train for that unless we have these little deaths. So embrace them enthusiastically, joyfully, in the awareness that because you're actually doing all right with this examination, you're doing okay, you're not dying off, you're not getting into self-pity, you're not giving up, because you're doing okay, this increases the chances of your having, after physical death, an amazingly wonderful paradise that you're creating for yourself, in which you live for 1,000 years, or so it seems. Death is great. Get into it.